We're going to give folks up to a minute to speak on each article as they want to. When you do speak, please just start by stating your name just for the record. Again, we'll give everybody about a minute to speak on each issue they want to with each article, give or take. We will circle back to or debate that we want to have on a specific one. So if we do have to move on, we'll carve out time at the end. If you want to speak, if you could please use the raise hand function. So the raise hand function is found at the bottom of your screen on the toolbar. There's a button that says reactions. If you click the button that says reactions, it'll pop up and there's a raise hand function. If you hit it, it will raise your hand. So I have my hand up now. You can see that. I don't know how to lower my hand though. So, my hand might just be up all meeting. There's Suzanne's hand. Hi, Suzanne. So if you could
just hit it again, Charlie.
You could use the raise hand function. It's weird. I can put your hands down, but I can't put my hand down apparently. So my hand might just be up all meeting. Anyway.
Can I add that on the iPad, it's a little bit different than just down on the bottom. I was noticing that on Saturday because I was logged in from my iPad. On the iPads, you actually have to click in the top right corner. There's 3 little dots and you can drop that down and that gives you the option to raise your hand from there. And I presume it might be the same from a phone.
Yes, so actually on the phone, if you're joining us by phone, *9 is the raise hand function and *6 is the unmute function. We do ask that if you're not speaking, you remain on mute so we can avoid background noise or feedback or anything like that. So again, if you'd like to speak on an issue, please use the raise hand function. Again, on most computers, it's down under reactions at the bottom of the screen. Hit reactions, there's a button that pops up, says raise hand, hit that and your hand will go up. Please use that. That way I can see in the participant list whose hand is up and you'll be recognized to speak. A few ground rules before we jump in. Keep your video on or off, whatever you prefer, doesn't matter to us. Please remain muted if you're not speaking to avoid background noise. When you are speaking, please address your comments to the chair. We're here to discuss the issues and debate those, but not to debate each other and certainly not to attack each other. So, again, please keep it civil. If folks can't follow these rules, you're going to be muted. And if you continue to not follow the rules, you'll be booted from the meeting. That's how it's going to work. Please also stay off the chat function if you would. We don't want to have 2 conversations going at once. So again, unless there's some, crazy issue that you need to, please stay off the chat function. So those are essentially the way this is going to work and the ground rules for this evening. So with that, we're going to jump right in. So the first article on the warning for town meeting is the election of officers. These again are typically done from the floor. Just by way of background, this year, candidates who wanted to be placed on the ballot had to submit a consent of candidate form, themselves essentially self-nominating. The ballot that is what's being voted on reflects all those who submitted consent of candidate forms. So that's how the names got there. So with that, we will open up any discussion on Article 1. So the floor is open for discussion on Article 1. These are the election of officers, items A through L. Again, if you're looking to be recognized, please use the raise hand function. At the bottom of your screen, it's under the reactions tab, hit the raise hand. Yes, Larry. Just remember to unmute. Larry, you have to unmute. Larry, I can see your lips moving, but I can't hear you. Okay, last call for Larry to unmute if you want to talk. Okay, Larry, if you want to speak again, just put your hand back up and I'll get back to you. Anybody else have any? Oh, Larry, you're off mute.
I'm off mute.
You're off mute now. Yeah, the floor is yours. Go for it.
Okay, real quick. Emily Kimball is running for a select board member. I don't really know anything about her. I just wonder if someone could enlighten me as to her background or whatever, or how long she's lived in Montgomery. I know she lives up on the Puffer Road above Erin, but I didn't notice her online tonight and I didn't see her there Saturday. So I wonder if someone could give us some information.
Thanks, Larry. I'll open the floor for anybody who can address Larry's question.
I guess I can address some of it because
Okay,
I had sent
Sue?
out an,
Yep.
okay, oh, I'm sorry, Sue Wilson. Because
You're
I
up.
had sent out an email to some people. Emily is she's lived in Montgomery, I think since 2013. She started her, the farm, Puffer Plateau Farm, the following year. She's been a teacher since 2008, having started at the Richford school in 2013. She is currently now the chair of the English department at Richford Junior and Senior High School. You know, she's so she's been a resident for a while, and you know, she's got a business here. So that's, I guess that's maybe all I could tell. And she's very nice. So I don't know what else to tell you, Larry.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you, Sue. Anybody else have anything for Article 1? Again, this is the election of officers. Article 1, going once, going twice. All right, we will move on to Article 2. Article 2, shall the voters authorize the treasurer pursuant to statutory reference to collect current taxes? This is kind of a wonky process one. This just basically legally enables Aaron, our treasurer, to collect current taxes. Hopefully this is not a controversial one. And if this gets voted down, someone will still collect your taxes. So don't think that this is going to get you out of paying taxes. Anything for Article 2? Again, please use the raise hand function just so we can see who wants to be recognized. All right, not seeing anything for Article 2, we will move on to Article 3. And again, we can circle back at the end of the meeting to any other questions after we work through each article. But for now, seeing nothing, we'll move on to Article 3. Article 3 is the budget question. Shall the voters accept a fiscal year 2022 budget of $1,235,606, of which $862,735 shall be raised by taxes and $334,363 by non-tax revenues, and authorize the select board to set a tax rate sufficient to provide the same? So this is the budget question this year. Typically, during town meeting, the budget questions are laid out into a number of different articles that are voted on separately. This year, the budget is rolled into one big question. And the reason that it's done that way is because essentially, if we were to vote on each individual thing individually, we would have no means of amending things as we go. So from the floor, if one thing gets voted up or down, we can amend the amount of the budget at the end. Since this is Australian ballot, we can't do that. There's no mechanism to amend different sections. So this year it's up or down, all or nothing as far as the budget goes. So that's why this year it's all baked into one question. So with that, we will entertain any questions, comments, debate on the budget question, Article 3. Again, please use the raise hand function to indicate that you want to be identified to speak. Again, if you're on the phone, *9 is the raise hand function, *6 to unmute. Any questions on the budget? Again, this is Article 3. It's one question on the entire municipal budget. All right, I am not seeing any questions on the budget regarding Article 3. Once, twice. All right, with that, we will move on to Article 4. Article 4, shall the voters approve a 1/2 cent increase in the tax rate to be allocated to the Conservation Reserve Fund established by the voters in 2018? So again, this was something that was established by the voters in 2018. The fund currently has about $1,600 in it. It was established to help support different conservation programs or projects in the community. A full enabling text of it can be found on the website. Any questions on Article 4? Again, please use the raise hand function to indicate that you'd like to be recognized. Okay, I'm not hearing anything on Article 4. So with that, we'll move to Article 5. Shall the voters establish a sewer reserve fund to assist in the repayment of debt obligations approved by the voters at a special election bond vote July 2020 to construct a municipal wastewater system in Montgomery Center and Village? So these three articles, 5, 6, and 7, these pertain to the financing of the wastewater project. Quick recap, if you remember in the summer, we had a bond vote which essentially authorized the borrowing authority for the full amount of each one of these projects. At that point, the board basically said to the community, this is a yellow light. Without this borrowing authority, we will not get the offer from USDA Rural Development, which we need to establish affordability and how do we pay for it. So the affirmative bond vote provided that yellow light, and from that we got the offer from USDA Rural Development. The framework of that is laid out in the State of the Town report. Much more information in depth is found on the Montgomery Thrives website, linked to the town website. So there's multiple sources of more information on what that offer came out to be. We can certainly discuss that here tonight. These three questions, 5, 6, and 7, essentially are the board coming back to the community and saying, we got the USDA Rural Development offer. We now understand what our debt obligation would potentially be, and these are the mechanisms by which we've come up with to pay for it in the most affordable way possible. Article 5 is, hold on one second. Sorry. Article 5 is essentially just a process one. In order for the town to earmark money to a specific purpose, the voters have to establish a reserve fund, which legally means any money going into that account can only be spent for those purposes. Article 5 establishes that fund so that any revenues raised from the measures in Article 6 and 7 would have a place to go, and it would be earmarked. So with that, I'm going to open up questions, comments, debate on Article 5. Again, please use the raise hand function if you'd like to be recognized. Any debate on Article 5? Okay, I am not seeing any hands. Oh wait, I've got Rita. Yep, go ahead, Rita. Feel free to unmute.
Hi, Charlie, it's Alan.
Oh, Alan, I'm sorry, it's Rita.
Charlie, I just have a question from what I read, I don't have any understanding about what this potential sewer system consists of. I don't know if it's taxpayer totally or it's user fees, and is there an introduction to users in terms of And do they have to use it? I mean, there's an amazing amount of questions and lack of information about what this system is. Is going to be a sewer processing system?
Yeah.
Are we going to need an operator? And is it mechanical? Anyway, basically, my question is, I'm looking for more information.
Yeah, great. Thank you for asking that. Because there is a plethora of more information available on the project. If you go to the Thrive's website, which is linked to the town website, or you can get there directly by entering the Thrive's address, on that website, there is the full preliminary engineering study that was conducted, looking at all the different alternatives for different kinds of systems, as well as the detail on the preferred alternative to the system that we decided to go with based on the analysis that was done. Also on the website is the full financing report that looks at essentially all the cost factors and the mechanisms whereby we could generate revenue to pay for it. So all of that is detailed there in terms of how much revenue would be needed, what the different sources would be, and then the framework we came out with in terms of how we thought best to achieve affordability and pay for the system. So that includes things like what would the user fee be? How much money would get raised by a local option tax? So if folks have questions on any detail in the system or any detail on how to finance the system, those can be found in those reports on that website.
Definitely take a look.
Say it again.
What? I said thank you.
You were unmuted.
Oh, thank you, Charlie. I
Thanks,
will
Alan.
definitely.
You're muted, Charlie.
Charlie, you're on mute.
Sorry, trying to corral a couple young dogs that are playing loudly behind me. Any other questions on Article 5? Okay, not seeing any hands, not hearing any questions on Article 5. With that, we're going to move on to, oh, Sue, I see your hand waving in the screen, so
Right,
go ahead.
because I don't have that little button on the bottom.
Okay.
Also, just like for Alan, that page 17 of the town report also has some pretty good information. It's your annual, the state of the Montgomery.
Yes,
that's-
so that letter
that's for him.
does have, yeah, that letter does give an overview on what the USDA rural development offer was, what the debt obligation would be.
Right.
And that kind of stuff, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions or debate on Article 5? Okay, not seeing anything on Article 5. And thanks, Gabby, for Gabby did put the link to the Thrive's website in the chat. So if you do want to get to the Thrive's website where those reports are housed, the link is in the chat. Thank you for doing that. All right, so with that, we're going to move on to Article 6. Article 6, whereas Article 5 establishes the actual, account, we're going to keep the money in. Article 6 is one of the mechanisms to help pay on the debt obligation for the system. Article 6 reads, shall the voters approve an additional tax in an amount not to exceed 0.0612 per $100 of assessed property value for a period not to exceed 30 years to be set aside in the sewer reserve fund to assist in the repayment of debt obligations approved by the voters at a special election bond vote July 2020. So this is one of the two mechanisms outside of the user fees that were determined to be necessary in order to make this project affordable to the users and get it paid for and affordable to the community. So with that, we'll open up conversation, debate, questions on Article 6. Again, if you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand function found in the bottom of your screen under reactions. If that doesn't work, just turn your video on and wave your hand wildly. Yeah, Walter, go ahead.
Yes. Charlie, could you, along with that statement of what we are paying per 100, can you just roughly tell everyone what the percentages that the grant comes through in on this for anyone who didn't read the document, how much the actual we're being gifted to make this happen versus what we're paying?
So I think what your question is, what are the outside funding sources that we've received? It breaks down into a few different categories. The main financing tool for this is a grant loan offer from USDA Rural Development. That was essentially the offer that we got that was triggered by the affirmative bond vote. That offer came in with a grant amount of a little over $6 million. There was an additional $500,000 from Northern Borders Regional Commission. And then we had some smaller awards of about $30,000. There was an additional $250,000 that were awarded. So when you add up all of the grant money, the free money, it leaves us with a 30-year loan at 1.125% from rural development to cover the remaining balance, which is about 4.9 million. So if you add up kind of all of the outside money, quick math in my head, you're looking at about 7 million in funds that are being granted to the community, which leaves us with a possible note of about 4.9 million at 1.125%. I will note that 4.9 million is a lot more money than I have in my account. It's a lot of money, but the 4.9 and the interest rate that we're getting is the best that USDA Rural Development has offered for a project in northern New England to date. So for comparison, it's a pretty good offer from them. Walter, do you have anything else under that, or?
I'll just expand on it just slightly. For those of you that don't know, I've been involved with for the Montgomery Thrives movement for the wastewater since its initiative with the original group that's been working on this for the past 3 years. I would just add that it was the significance of the amount of money that we've been gifted. While it still seems like we're left with quite a bill for ourselves, there is no other, I'm just expanding on the point that Charlie made, no other project like this has been given anywhere near this percentage coverage by grant. It's quite significant. And in comparison, I forget what the percentage was because it was so long ago, but this was quite an impressive amount of money to be gifted to the town, considering the economic impact that it all can make upon us. So I hope you all give it all a lot of consideration.
Thanks, Walt. Daniel Kahn, I saw your hands up next in order. So with that, feel free to come off mute and go ahead.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Walt. Charlie, in your estimation, so I haven't really followed it in the last couple of months, but do you think that there's going to be a better time for more money to be given out? Are there going to be larger pools to draw from in the future, or is now one of the sort of better times to sort of strike while the iron's hot with a project like this?
Yeah, so two things on that point. One is that this idea, if we think about two different buckets of money, we have a bucket of money which is essentially grants, money that's given to the town. Then we have what the town's debt obligation would be. That's the grant loan balance. The way USDA Rural Development works is that when they extend this offer to you with their grant against the loan they're offering, at that point, they've baked in all the outside money. So at this point, any additional grant funds that we were to raise towards this project would go against the grant amount and not the loan amount. So at this point, there's no other outside funds that we can go after under this package to get our loan amount down. We know what the debt obligation would be, and that's what we're working from. So to that end, there's no other funds at this point that we can go after to get that drawn down even more. Kind of bigger picture, what does this mean in the continuum of stuff? I guess it's a little bit of an unknown in that no one knows what's going to happen in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. But Again, as Walter pointed out, from a USDA RD standpoint, this is one of the best offers they've ever made to a community. We do have our eyes set on some things coming out of Congress. So like if they do pass a major infrastructure bill, we will be, we're looking to go after that funding too. However, that funding we're looking to use towards the streetscape work, which has been paused from fully figure out this financing. So that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, Dan, but at this point, no, we don't see any other potential outside sources to get additional funds in to drive that final loan amount down.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, Dan. Kat, I see your hand up. Go for it.
Really, yeah, it's Kat Barnard. So I just wondered, in the overall budget, is there monies allocated for potential cost overruns? And part two of that question is, like, in the future, if this did happen and over the 30-year course of repayment, if there was like additional repairs, maintenance, or additional improvements that had to happen, how would those be covered? Like, would that require additional funding, or is there anything like allocated for like a reserve fund?
Yeah, it's a great question. This came up at Saturday's meeting as well. So as far as the cost overruns during construction, the full project budget is found in the reports on the Thrive site. So anyone can feel free to dig into that. But there is, I think contingency is the phrase that we use, but there is a percentage baked into the budget to allow for cost overruns or contingencies. So there is money baked into the project budget to essentially buffer that. As far as the annual costs going forward, in the project budget and what plays into things like user fees and the costs associated with this are the operations and maintenance costs. So we do have projections of kind of what those are for systems like this on what kind of a time frame. So those are baked into the budget, the project budget itself.
Okay, thank you.
And I will also add just that the way this article is phrased is really intentional. Quote, in the amount not to exceed 0.0612. So this is designed so that over time, if we get economic development growth in the grand list associated with this project, that amount can be ratcheted down. This amount is basically a function of grand list value. And so if that grand list grows, that number can come down over time because you have a bigger pie to draw from. So this is set up in a way where, if over time we do see growth in the grand list, that individual addition to the tax rate would shrink. Anybody else on Article 6? Suzanne, yep, go ahead.
Hi, Suzanne Thulwa. At the last meeting on Saturday, you gave a cost example for, I believe it was $200,000 property value, how that would reflect in this amount. Can you just provide that number again?
Yep. So in terms of what this would mean, this additional, 6 cents more or less on the tax rate, and this is in the letter to the town in the town report. But if you think about what this would mean for an average property, so a property assessed at $250,000 in value, this would mean an extra $150 in municipal taxes annually. So again, $250,000 valuation on a property, that means that you're looking at an additional $150 in municipal taxes annually. So you can kind of use that as a marker and adjust to there. But if you want to know, you can basically take your assessment, convert it to the grand list value, again, because that's how the taxes are figured, and just multiply it, and you'll see what it would mean for your own property as far as an increase in municipal taxes annually. Thanks, Suzanne. Other questions on Article 6? I see a hand up on the phone number 326-4349. So 4349, feel free to come off mute star 6 is to come off mute.
Hi, this is Joanne Lamphere. I'm just wondering, we had that special election bond vote in July for the wastewater system. I thought that was just to get a, see what we could get from the USDA to go ahead and, just to see what we would qualify for. I didn't think this was a done deal. Don't we have to have another vote on that?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So this is that other vote, essentially. Again, the bond vote was the board asking for the authority to borrow the entire amount for the project, because without that, USDA would not release their offer. So following the affirmative bond vote, USDA Rural Development released their grant loan funding offer, which again is detailed on page 17 of the town report. And then based on that, the board, put their heads together and figured out how would we repay the debt service on that note. And those are the questions that are in this year's warning.
Right, but there isn't going to be another vote whether or not the people of Montgomery actually want the wastewater system. If we say yes to this, then we're approving a wastewater system. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes, this vote essentially is the ratification of support for the project.
It's just very confusing. I think it should have been explained a little better in that article, that if we approve this, then it's a done deal.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you for the feedback. But to answer your question, yes, I mean, an affirmative vote on 6 and 7 is the community essentially ratifying the support that was expressed in the bond vote for the project, and essentially gives us what we need to move forward with the project. And I will note too that this is not the streetscapes project. That's been put on pause while we figure out the financing on this end. We're going to pick up any discussion on that more towards the spring.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. I see your hand up, Walt. I do want to give anybody else a chance to chime in who hasn't spoken yet. So if anybody who hasn't spoken yet would like to speak on this, please raise your hand. Merle, I see you holding up a phone. Is that a request to speak, or is that just holding up a phone? I can't hear you. Okay, looks like not. So, okay, anybody else looking to speak on Article 6? Okay, well, go ahead.
Hey, Walter Knight again. I just want to tell everyone, while we were all looking over how to best way to fund and pay for this project, there was opportunities to pay for it in quite a few ways. And I wanted to mention that we actually took one of the most conservative ways that we could pay for it. We didn't want to use any type of way that would, we literally said in the meeting, we don't want to have to answer questions later as to why it costs more than we thought it was going to, or why we don't have enough money. So we did away with some of the possible ways to pay for it that were not questionable, just not guaranteed. And a lot of effort was put into making sure that this was a black and white thing. With anything that happens in the future would be a pleasant surprise that we could take advantage of later, but we didn't want any surprises in the future for anyone that we could control.
All right, thanks, Walt. Anybody else on Article 6? Okay, not seeing any other hands for Article 6. We're going to move on to Article 7. So again, Article 7 is the second of two of the financing mechanisms that we've come up with for the project. Article 7 reads, shall the voters approve the imposition of a 1% local option tax on sales, meals, alcoholic beverages, and rooms pursuant to 24 VSA 138B, with all proceeds to be set aside in the sewer reserve fund to assist in the repayment of debt obligations related to the construction of a municipal wastewater system in Montgomery Center and Village. So again, when we looked at the financing options that were in front of us, whether that was raising property taxes, hiking other fees, finding other outside ways, this was a mechanism that was identified as a way to generate revenue, specifically because it was seen as a mechanism that could bring in revenue from outside of the community and would not rely solely on property taxes. So with that, we'll open up any kind of questions, comments, debate on Article 7. Again, if you'd like to be recognized, please raise your hand using the raise hand function. If you go down to reactions, hit the reactions button, and then hit the raise hand button. We'll see you pop up in the participants list and you'll be recognized. And if that's not working for you, wave your hand frantically. Yes, Merle, I see your hand. So go ahead, you can come off mute.
There, couldn't get down to it. My taskbar
There you
is
go.
stuck up. It's not so much of a question. It's just I've never had an opportunity to ask the question. I guess this is just as good a time as any. Not going to change anything. Just rather curious that in light of the fact that we've had, I know one, if not two previous feasibility studies for a sewer system in the center and village, and it was not feasible. And I'm just curious what is different now than those first two times. That now, I guess you say it's feasible, but twice before it wasn't. So what is it? What made it feasible this time?
Yeah, that's a good question, Merle. So I have to put a disclaimer here, not being at the table during those discussions in the past. I can't speak specifically to it, but I do know that there was one feasibility study done in the past. This was after the flood in 94, 97, 94. There was 97. I saw fingers helping me out there. And so there was a feasibility study done. At that point, my understanding is that basically the price tag came back and the town said, we don't want it because of the price tag. But if there is anybody here who would like to speak to Merle's question, by all means, please chime in. So Merle, unfortunately, Merle, I can't give you an apples to apples comparison of why now and not then. But again, my understanding was that basically the town declined to do it based on the price tag last time. So
it's Walter Knight. I can chime in on this, Charlie, a little bit if you want me to.
Right, sure, I see your hand up, Walt, go ahead.
Yeah. So Merle, my knowledge on it is similar to Charlie's, but I can add one little bit. One of the things that's happened since the previous feasibility study is enough time's gone by that more science and more real world application of what used to be allowed, what would have been allowed in 97, it's advanced. So we had more options to look at. And in some ways, though you always hear about environmental regulations being stiffened, we actually had more options due to a not looser environmental standard, but just the options expanded due to science and technology moving forward. That all said, we actually, if you, whenever anyone reads the study, we took a very classic way to handle this system, but it wasn't necessarily feasible in 97, and it is now. That's what I have to say on that.
Thanks, Walt. I see a hand up for iPad. Is that Larry? Whoever has their hand up and their label is iPad.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's where it is. Thank God
ahead,
for
Larry.
Anita. Charlie, I noticed Walter is not a resident of Montgomery and he's doing considerable about it, talking about this subject, and I'm not sure that's appropriate.
Yeah, so
he's
good
done a
point.
lot of work and he's very knowledgeable. However, I'm not sure as a non-resident, he should be doing the salesman talk.
Yeah, so let me just, to that end, so this is a select board hearing. It's not town meeting. So at town meeting, if somebody who's not a registered voter wants to speak, the body has to essentially allow them. That doesn't apply here. If anybody wants to speak, we're going to let them say their piece. You're right. I think Walt lives about 30 feet over the town line, in the part of Alpine Haven that I think most of us consider to be part of Montgomery, because there's not much of Westfield that connects with them. So, you know, your point's well taken. Walt has put in a huge amount of time on this project. You know, he might rest his head in Westfield, but he owns at least a few properties in Montgomery and is pretty active in the community. That being said, if other folks want to talk, by all means, you are able to talk this evening. So if other folks want to come off mute, they are welcome to raise their hand.
By no means was I trying to tick Walt off. I just wanted to make sure it was appropriate.
Yep.
I do know that he's worked quite hard.
Yep. Yeah. So from a process standpoint, the point's well taken, and that, yeah, we're not operating by the same town meeting rules as far as recognizing non-registered voters.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Larry. Again, Article 7, Mark. Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
I think one of the big things in the study in '97 was that they were looking at discharging into the river, into the Trout River, the waste. And this, you know, over time the technology has improved. So I think now they were looking at, you know, putting in like sewer systems and whole different technology now than trying to discharge into the river. So I think that was one of the big cost prohibitors, was building the plant to discharge into the river.
Great, thanks, Mark. So again, as it was stated, if you hit the link in the chat, it'll bring you to the Thrives website, and there you can find the complete preliminary engineering report. You can find the financing study, which outlines all of the options we considered and then weighed based on things like cost and risk and affordability. Anything else on Article 7? Okay, seeing nothing else by way of hands coming up, we'll move on to Article 8. Article 8 reads, shall the voters authorize cannabis retailers and integrated licensees to operate in Montgomery pursuant to 7 VSA 863? So when the legislature passed what a lot of folks just call the retail pot legislation, they set it up so that towns needed to opt in order to have these businesses in their community. The legislature kicked it back to the towns. So the board said, okay, let's kick it back to the town. So the question is before the town. This would allow for cannabis retailers and integrated licensees to operate in Montgomery. This would be the opt-in. I will say that since the passage of that legislation, things have stalled quite a bit in Montpelier due to things like a global pandemic. So things like the board that regulates this, some of the other supporting guidelines, criteria, frameworks have not been created or addressed yet. So there is still a fair amount of kind of uncertainty looking out on the horizon. But this essentially would be the community's up or down vote on whether or not these businesses are going to open up shop here, or could open up shop here, I should say. So with that, we'll open up any questions, comments, debate on Article 8. Deanna, yeah, I see your hand.
Hey, Charlie. I was wondering if one of these businesses or multiple were to come to Montgomery and we saw a rise in tax revenue from the 1% local option tax, if that could in any way offset future payments for the wastewater and or the streetscapes eventually.
Yeah, great question, Deanna. So again, when we think about the repayment on the note for the wastewater system, that is a fixed amount, 30 years. We know how much annually we have to pay. Article 6 and 7 are mechanisms to do that. Article 7 is based on the financing report, which suggests, based on the sales returns the state's provided us, that we generate about $35,000 annually from that. If we saw business growth, sales growth associated with retail cannabis or other retailers, or other growth related to new restaurants or a new inn or something like that, any additional revenue from the 1% tax would go into that account and then would offset the percentage of debt allocation that would have to come from the property taxes. So essentially, the short answer is yes. If we saw growth that led to increased revenue from the 1% local option tax, that would then take the 0.0612 in Article 6 and reduce it, because we would need less money from municipal taxes to then put towards that debt obligation. Other questions? And again, just remember too that these two articles, 6 and 7, they specifically earmark and reserve the funds raised by them into that account. So this is not general property tax revenue that the board's going to go buy our golden bidets with. This is for the wastewater. I shouldn't use that. It's because it's wastewater related. We're not going to do something else with it. It goes towards the wastewater system. Titus, yes, go ahead. Just remember to come off mute.
This is Titus Pressler. Thank you, Charlie. Is the select board aware of any specific proposals from folks who want to open cannabis shops in Montgomery at this time?
No, the board is not aware of any proposals from any businesses existing or businesses that are, thinking about it. It's not to say that no one is. We're just not aware of it. We did have a couple people come to the board regarding this article and supporting its addition, just to put it out to the town and ask the question. But neither person who brought this forward was, at least at that point, expressing interest in opening any kind of a retail shop or any other kind of integrated operation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Titus. Anything else on Article 8? Article 8, going once. Article 8, going twice. All right, moving on to Article 9. Article 9 reads, shall the voters direct the select board to amend the town of Montgomery's all-terrain vehicle ordinance dated August 18th, 2003 to add section 4, number 1 as follows. Quote, the use of ATVs is authorized on all town roads located in the town of Montgomery, including Hazen's Notch Road, Fuller Bridge Road, and to the extent permitted by the state, along Vermont State Routes 118 and 242, pursuant to 23 VSA 3510. So this essentially is a article that would direct the select board to amend the ATV ordinance to open additional roads in the community. Couple process things just to make it clear to people. So one is that this is an advisory vote to direct the board to do something. We don't operate like, say, California, for example, where direct questions to the voters lead to direct things through referendum. This is an advisory vote because that's how we operate. So following this, if it were to pass, the board would then convene, the board would discuss, the board would then vote up or down to amend the ordinance. That would then go through the existing process and statute, whereby there would be a reconsideration period. So this could end up back before the voters. So that's just a long way of saying this is subject to the ordinance process in statute. This isn't essentially a upvote down, like an upvote would just do it. I also want to point out something really important here, and that's the line in here, to the extent permitted by the state, and that's regarding state highways 118 and 242. It is illegal to operate an ATV on a state highway. However, VTrans can give permission to towns to open up portions of state highways at their request, should they, for example, link existing trails or provide some function around that. So I just want to make that clear that this would not, nor do we have the ability to, amend an ordinance to just allow ATVs on every state highway, all sections of 118 and 242. Okay, so with that, we'll open up questions, comments, debate on Article 9. Again, please use the raise hand function. Yeah, Mark.
I just wanted to add that this was a legal petition that was sent to the board with a 50 legal taxpayers, and this is why we put it on, because we had a legal petition.
Yep. Thanks, Mark. That's a great point. So the board did receive a petition around this that had more than the requisite number of legal voters' signatures, and that put it on there. So yeah, quick side add that don't forget, you can force an item to be added to the town meeting warning in the future. All it takes is a petition of 10% or 5%. Works out to be about 50 people. So, it's direct democracy in action, folks. So again, open up for questions, comments, debate on Article 9. Don't forget, if you're on the phone, you can *9 to raise hand, *6 to unmute. Kat, yep, I see your hand.
Yeah, and maybe Mark can speak to this, and I'm not being facetious, but I just wondered if people are already driving on the roads, like, what does it matter if it's allowed or not? I don't know if I'm phrasing that right, but I mean, people are already doing it. So what does it matter, I guess? And again, I'm not trying to be facetious, but so maybe Mark, since you were a part of the people that were for it, like, could just tell me what the reason is behind it.
So that's directed at Mark Briette, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, so Mark, I'll give you an opportunity to respond. Go ahead.
I never said if I'm for it or against it, but this just opens up the roads legally. Actually, the other end of Route 58, Westfield, is already open. The town of Westfield has opened it. And then the other end of my road, Fuller Bridge Road, is already open too. Richford has opened it. I think it just opens it up for Vasa, so it makes it a trail through town. So, I mean, that's the only difference.
Thanks, Mark. And no, I wasn't meaning to assume. I thought you said you were a part of it. So, and that makes sense to kind of bridge the gap, I guess, between the two towns, because I've heard a lot about that, like over in Lowell, and how a lot of people go to Lowell. And I don't know how I feel about it. I'm just kind of confused about the whole thing. I just don't even understand it, I guess.
I just think my personal opinion is that I think it will be policed better if it is open to Vasa, because there'll be more legal, people on it, and they'll hopefully police it, get the illegal people off. So.
Thanks, Mark. Titus, I saw your hand up next in the list, so go ahead.
This isn't a question, but it's an expression of opinion that I'm personally opposed to this article. My sense is that we have far too much ATV traffic on our town roads as it is. And it seems to me that many people in the ATV community see Montgomery as kind of a playground with consequent violations of speed limits and age limits and the like, really quite rampant. And so I'm personally opposed to any expansion of ATV traffic. And I'm not at all confident that there will be any policing, because there has not been any policing hitherto. We live on Hill West Road, and ATVs are trafficking up here in the summer times far in excess of the speed limits, and kids clearly under the age of any reasonable age at which they can be trusted to operate a vehicle of this kind on a town road, equally fast and equally frequent. And so given the lack of policing that Montgomery must live with, given the fact that we don't have a police department and the like, I'm personally quite opposed to opening up any further roads to ATVs. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Titus. Yeah, and just to clarify again, this article does not deal in any way with enforcement of anything. Suzanne, I saw your hand up. Did you want to speak or?
Just to Kat's question, to add to that response, I think part of it also, or the incentive for part of it, is that opening the roads in this regard would allow, would like attract more non-resident traffic to be able to pass through on like a legally marked road or passage from one end of Montgomery to the other, whether it be to Lowell or Westfield or Enosburg or Richford.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne. Sue, I saw you waving into the camera, so go ahead. The floor is yours.
Shirley, a question on the, if you did amend this, to add this, would this open up all class 4 roads, for instance, Dreamers Road and Purrier Farm Road? Would it open up all the class 4 roads?
I believe all class 4 roads are technically already open under the ordinance. I don't have a copy of it in front of me though. Mark, can you clarify that?
I believe they are too. I believe the class 3 and 4 roads are already open.
So they are already open to the ATV?
I believe so,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
All right, that was just my question. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Sue. Other questions, comments, thoughts? So I see, Kat, your hand came up first. So actually, I'm sorry, Kat, you've had a chance to speak on this. So I'm going to go to P&L first. Not sure who P&L is, so there you are. Just remember to come off mute and just please state your name first. Thanks.
Hi, Charlie. My name is Peter Amston, and I appreciate the chance to have a chance to ask a question here. I live on 242, which is, as some other folks have already talked about, the lack of policing in this area is already a significantly high-speed road. I live on a blind corner where we regularly see accidents, and I have a hard time understanding the motivation behind this request. And I'd like to understand what is the data that the proponents of this have with respect to safety, and that we would not increase the number of accidents in this area. I have no problem understanding trail crossings so that people can go from one area to another area, but actually driving on the roads with an ATV on a 50-mile-an-hour road doesn't make sense whatsoever. So I'm trying to understand where's the data behind this to say that it is a safe and viable action.
Great, thanks so much for the question. So I don't have that data or anything, but I would encourage anybody who's here in the quote room who'd like to speak to that question to raise your hand. Anything else to add to the question, Peter?
I guess not, other than the fact that the silence seems to say that while there's a desire there, there's not much study and data behind it to say that this is something the community should actually allow at this point in time.
Great, thanks for the comment and the question. And again, I will turn it over to anybody else who wants to speak to that question. Again, just raise your hand. I see Mark's hand up. I did see Kat's hand up. Kat, if you wanted to speak, feel free to jump in now unless you.
Yeah, I'll go again. So you had described it as like sort of more a process though, that this would still be something that you guys as the select board are like taking on and then kind of going through some sort of process. So like, would there be ways to address safety and policing at that point by you guys, or like, I guess, how would that be addressed?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, just from a completely process standpoint, in order to amend the ordinance, the board would have to convene, discuss, and then vote to amend the ordinance. So that would actually be when the ordinance gets amended, not with passage of this. I mean, the board could certainly talk about that and consider it. I'm not trying to be like dodgy around what the board would do, because we're probably going to have a new member. I can't speak to that in the future. The board could discuss all of those things. I will add that, again, this article does not deal with enforcement. We have had multiple hearings in the past where the question of enforcement has come up. And I think I can rightly say that the board does still have questions around enforcement. But that figuring that out would not be a determinate mechanism before an ordinance could be amended, frankly.
Thank you.
Mark, I saw your hand was up, so Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, this is an advisory article for Merle Van Giesen. This is an advisory article for the selectmen, is that correct?
Yes, shall the voters direct the select board to amend? So it's an advisory ordinance to direct the select board to amend. And again, that's just based on the statutory process of amendments. The legislative body needs to amend it. It doesn't get amended from the passage of the voters article.
In the event that you get the go-ahead, I hope that you will do some research, some investigation before you actually implement it. On the surface, it's just, as the old saying, it kind of appears like this is accident or maybe accidents waiting to happen. So I think you really need to be careful and really do some studying before you actually implement this. Thank you.
Thanks, Merle. Mark.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to say is, you know, even if this does pass, I mean, we still have a lot of work, you know, research to do before we would, you know, go ahead with it. And there's a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah. Others that want to speak to Article 9. Not seeing any other hands for Article 9. So at this point, I will open it back up to essentially any questions, comments, debate, thoughts, reflections, feelings from anybody in the room. So I'm not seeing anybody's hands coming up. Titus, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Charlie. Just one footnote on the ATV question. The argument that other towns are doing it, and so somehow we should feel pressured to open up our roads, seems to me to be a very weak argument. I realize that, you know, from some standpoint of traffic management, it may seem advisable to link trails and such, but it seems clear to me that the basic issue of the advisability of more ATV traffic, given all of the consistently, you know, very, very frequent violations of all kinds that occur, that's what needs to be addressed. And maybe other towns might have the courage to cut back if Montgomery holds the line. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Titus. Yeah, Carissa, go ahead.
Hi, Charlie. Hi, everybody. Carissa Stein, thank you for the time. I just want to say to everybody who's been doing and putting in the hard effort on the Montgomery Thrives for the municipal waste, thank you very much. I know it doesn't mean much coming from a computer screen, but you are very appreciated. Thanks. No matter how it goes tomorrow.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I will thank you, Carissa. Yeah, regardless of the vote, there's been a lot of work by a lot of dedicated people putting in a lot of unpaid hours on this. And we had a great team as well that helped us. So yeah, just kudos to them. And then also thank you for everybody who hopped on this tonight. I think there's 32 people on here tonight. There was about 27, Saturday. It's weird. It's a weird year. We're on Zoom. We're not in the Grange Hall. We're not going to all go to Bernie's afterwards for margaritas. Not that we drink those that early in the day. But thanks. It means a lot, for participating, even just coming out to listen. I also want to make one more thank you before we drop off tonight. And unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight because he's teaching a class, but just a big thank you to Jacob. Jacob's not running for reelection, but Jacob's served on the board for 2 terms. He's brought a lot of expertise, a lot of insight to what we're doing. Jacob is probably the one who's most responsible for launching the Montgomery Thrives initiative way back then. And so, if you see Jacob, give him a pat on the back, tell him thanks. So I don't want to curtail discussion. Again, if anybody else has any questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, expressions of love and affection or anything like that they want to sing out, please raise your hand and you're welcome to do so.
I just want to say thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah, so tomorrow the polls are open 10 to 7. It is no longer, no longer early voting. So you got to do it tomorrow. If you do have ballots that you have received, you can drop them off at the polling location or at the drop box at the clerk's office. Otherwise, go to the polls 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, everybody.